Hello and welcome to another edition of Mailbag. What is Mailbag? Well, Mailbag is a feature of the channel where you guys leave lots of comments on the channel and I attempt to answer those comments, or if I can't answer those comments, I throw it out to you guys who have more knowledge on some of this stuff than I do. So let's get into the first mailbag of this session. Remember, like, comment, subscribe to the channel. Go over to Instagram and follow me there. Go over to Facebook, follow me there. That's where the normal notices are. And consider becoming a Patreon. Next question comes from Ivor Fritt of Hanson. Hopefully I've got the breaks in that one right. This was in response to Korg Karma 3, Game Changer, or just an update. A SMR I did in January 2025. Ivor writes, good. I have a red maroon Korg Karma from the year 2001. It is surprising me, yet all say all. The keyboard is far ahead many keyboards who came after Korg Karma in function. Now Stephen K is working on the VST platform for Karma. Hope he gets success. It's a huge programming work. I have a Korg Kronos X88, but when the reports came in of starting problems, I sell it before I was in the same problem. But my red Korg Karma has never disappointed me. The broken English, unfortunately, is how the individual wrote this. So sometimes, even though I try to sort of correct it a little bit, it's probably better to read the commentator's words rather than my words. Anyway, again, a Korg Karma is one of those. I mean, obviously, I've got Karma on Kronos, but it's not quite the same thing. But the Korg Karma is spoken of fondly by many people. I've never played one, I must admit. I've seen one, I've never played one. But many people who have insight on the Korg Karma do speak of it fondly in the early noughties. And I say I wasn't in a position to buy it in the early noughties, so I didn't. But it's really an interesting area of the Kronos program. I've spent many hours getting nowhere with Karma. I have to be honest. I kind of need to sit down and just probably spend a couple of weeks. I can do things with Karma, but I don't really think I'm getting the best out of Karma when I use it. That's probably the way I would say it. And it's one of those things where you spend ages trying to get something and you get nowhere. And then all of a sudden you come back to it and you make a couple of tweaks and all of a sudden you get it. It just drops into place. And I really can't tell you why. Which is really kind of upsetting because I normally am quite good at this sort of stuff. But this is just, I don't know what it is. I just have a mental block. It's like I also have a mental block with the S2400. You know, I've got the S2400, I use the S2400, but I really have a mental block about whether I'm getting actually the best out of that particular platform. Anyway, I kind of digress there. I do wonder if they're going to make the Karma. I mean, you can buy Karma, or you used to be able to buy Karma to install on your laptop. I'm not sure whether you can still do that. I haven't really looked at the Karma website in quite a while. But I've said many times on the channel that issues that people are reporting with Kronos, I've never experienced them, touch wood. So, you know, it's really difficult for me in a lot of instances to really get to grips with what you're experiencing. I mean, I've had, you know, back in the past when I did used to play, you know, I've had keyboards fail on me on stage. I've had people pour beer into a keyboard, and keyboards and beer don't mix particularly well. So, you know, I've kind of had all that stuff, and you know, having to get through a set. I always used to have two keyboards when I played. Having to get through a set with your second keyboard when the first one goes point, and not quite having the right sounds, but having enough to approximate to get me through. Even if, you know, I don't know, but I've never experienced the Kronos one. And, you know, these things are so functional nowadays, and we use them in such interesting ways, is probably the way I put it. You know, you can have a sample, you know, you can trigger samples, you can trigger sequences, you can do all kinds of things on a modern workstation when you're playing live that the audience don't realise. You haven't got an orchestra sitting behind you, but the keyboard is making up for all that. And when you lose that sort of stuff, when you're so used to having it there, you know, you're so used to having, you know, the bottom half of the keyboard with a whole load of triggers and samples and stuff like that loaded there, and when it doesn't work, you're completely lost. And I completely get that, and I completely get the nervousness that a lot of people who interact with me via this channel, either on Instagram, Facebook, or through the website, the web chat, you know, the kind of the stories they retell to me about, you know, I was on stage and all of a sudden the boot up error, or it just stopped working and I got an error and I couldn't reboot it. That would kind of drill me with horror. You know, I look back at all the way through things I've done in music, I've always had a backup. You know, I used to, when I was starting DJing, I always had 2 amps and 4 speakers. Now people would turn around and say, well, that's overkill. It is overkill. But on the flip side, if an amp went down, I could just run everything on 1 amp. If the speakers went US, I had another set of speakers. I never had a situation where I couldn't get through the night. That's probably the way I would do it. You know, I used to have, you know, obviously back in those days it was all 12-inch vinyl, but I used to have a lot of stuff on CD. And funny enough, I've just got it working here. You can't see it, but I've got my old Denon DN2000F. Now that really is a relic. So, you know, people will turn around at me and say, bloody hell, that's really old. It is really old, but it still works, and it's still absolutely, it's got a few knocks and bashes on it, but it's still mint condition. And it works beautifully. I've been using it over the last week since I got it wired in properly. And, you know, you don't need something fancy, you just need something that works. So in addition to, you know, my SL1210s, which I would have had on the disco unit, I had a dual CD player. So I could get through the night. I could get through the night working between 1 CD. The only thing I didn't have a duplicate of was the mixer. But I'll be honest with you, apart from somebody pouring beer in a mixer, I've never actually known a mixer go wrong. They're pretty basic things, unless you go for something really fancy. And that's the problem with, I mean, my mixer was a Cytronic mixer that I used to have on my mobile unit. And they were absolutely solid as they come. I mean, that was the reason why a lot of people in the day used to use Cytronic. Then along came the upstarts, you know, the kind of the Newmans and the Mackeys and various other brands. And they were never quite solidly built. That's the reason why I never swapped my Cytronic. The Cytronic was absolutely solid. Anyway, I digress completely off that one.